winning a mandate for change to increase activism in response to the challenges facing the unions. Hassan is committed to working together for fairness in the workplace and Canadian society, from retirement security for all, to good jobs, to protecting public health care and creating a national child care program. Coming to Canada from Vienna at 16 years old, Hassan was a heavy truck mechanic, but quickly became plant chair after just 3 meetings. He went on to senior positions in Unifor, formerly Canadian Auto Workers. Hassan was elected as an executive vice president of the Canadian Labour Congress in 1999, followed by 4 terms as secretary-treasurer. Hassan is also respected internationally, serving as president of the Trade Union Confederation of the Americas, representing over 50 million workers in 29 countries. The CLC is the voice of Canadians' labour movement, representing 3.3 million workers. Please welcome Hassan Yussuff.
Good morning, sisters and brothers. It's good to be up here in the north. I get to come here every so often, and so consistently every time I come here that I don't stay long enough. So I said, well, next time if you invite me fishing, maybe I'll stay longer. But it's great to be here, and let me, before I get into my remarks, take at least a small moment to reflect. As all of you are aware, I mean, this has not been a good week in the country, for the most part. We see two, of course, important members of our military got killed this week. Incidents in the context that none of us would want to, of course, happen to any one of us. And I think the important point I need to make is that what happened this week is not a reflection of our country in any form or way. More importantly, it is important for us to show solidarity with the families and, of course, that are grieving the loss of their loved one, and, of course, reinforce our commitment to build a country that is free of hate and terrorism, and more importantly, unites us as working people, as coast to coast, to say how important this country is. And cultures and communities from coast to coast, we try to, of course, to work to make it even much stronger. We devote ourselves to ensure that the values of this country never gets broken, regardless of when incidents like this happen. If we may take a minute of silence, I would ask you to stand to reflect on the loss of 2 important people in the community. Thank you. So first, sisters and brothers, it's my great pleasure, of course, to bring you greetings on behalf of Sister Barbara, our Secretary-Treasurer, Sister Mary Clark Walker, Executive Vice President, and Sister Brother Donald LaFleur, and myself on behalf of the Committee of Congress. I also want to start off to thank some of you who may have been at the CLC Convention in May in Montreal. If you were there, at least one of you were there, many of you may have been there, or probably watching, observing the convention from afar. Thank you for your support. I want to sincerely express my sincere thanks to your National President, Robin, and our entire leadership for the support and the work you did to make it possible for me to become your President of the Labour Congress. So thank you so much for your support and your leadership. Of course, I want to salute your President, Steve, and of course your leadership in YEU, as I've been visiting your website. And I'm encouraged and thrilled about the community outreach that you're doing in your organization, about the growth of the union, but also of its visionary leadership that you're showing in terms of strategic work that you're doing within your union during your history. I'm also encouraging you YEU activists that I read about on the website, with all of the work that you're doing, and I'll reflect a little bit more in my remarks, because I think some of this work fits so neatly with the work that Congress is doing in terms of its fairness campaign. Sisters and brothers, I can tell you, certainly coming out of the CLC Convention in Montreal, I'm energized by the mood of the convention, delegates, also on the convention floor. And I think many of the delegates agree with my assertion that we have to push back the forces of big businesses and government across this country that, of course, are attacking us and trying to roll back the gains, the hard-won gains that we've made across this country, and also the provincial and territorial level. Some of these, of course, are using austerity measures, of course, to take away things that we've achieved in many, many years of struggle. And at the same time, of course, trying to attack the rights of workers, whether it's in the territory or right across the country. We're seeing this as it's happening. Of course, these are not radical trade unionist ideas at all that they're trying to take away. The national slave protection that we fought for and won has been in place for many, many decades, and of course, seemed to be the norm. Since Stephen's Harper election in 2006, right-wing politicians, aided by organizations such as the CFIB, Merit, and Labour Watch, have decided to attack unions by getting their friends to introduce, of course, legislation to attack and take away the rights of workers, the right to strike, and of course the attack is much broader than that. The right to refuse unsafe work that we've seen in amendments made to the federal legislation at the national level. Of course, legislation introduced through private members' bill, of course, to restrict their ability to organize workers within the federal sector by taking away card certification, our ability to bargain collectively, and to limit their ability to fight back in the political arena. Bill 377 is one of those examples. Bill 377 has been used as, transparency in union financing. It has nothing to do with transparency in union financing. This is a bill fundamentally to limit our ability to, of course, to engage politicians in the political arena to defend our members. That bill, of course, we've been seeing on a hiatus in the Senate now for over a year. Finally seems like we're going to put some life in it, and we'll see whether or not they decide to bring it, of course, and pass it and bring it into law. I have said publicly, and I'll say it here again, no bill, no piece of legislation in this country will take away the right of the labor movement to engage politically across this country with a real peace and if Harper and his friends think that they're going to get away with this, they've got something coming. We'll do everything that's humanly possible to defy this legislation and to challenge it wherever it's necessary, because it's certainly an anti-union piece of legislation. It has nothing to do with union transparency. Let me give you one example. We did a search in regard to workers who have not been able to get any information from their union because they've requested it, financial information from the union. We only found 6 examples across the country. 6. In those 6, the labor boards, of course, intervened to say to the union you have to provide. That certainly does not warrant Bill 377 to the large extent. And of course, within the federal jurisdiction, which of course regulates workers within the federal jurisdiction, there is provisions in Canada Labor Code Part 2 to provide for that to happen. Another private member bill, Bill C-525, we've had no card certification at the federal level for over 70 years. Workers are able to join a union simply by signing a union card. As a matter of fact, even the employers agree with these provisions in the Canada Labor Code. When we recently reviewed the Canada Labor Code a little bit over a decade ago, the employers agreed that card certification is a reasonable balance for workers who want to join the union. Of course, we saw a private member bill introduced by the Conservative to take that away. It's now in the Senate, all likelihood that it'll likely pass it. Again, is to show this government determination and meanness against workers and their unions across this country. Bill C4 and C60. Again, both provisions was put in budget omnibus legislation, and of course attacking, and most recently, of course, the introduction trying, of course, to go after workers within the federal jurisdiction on sick time provisions in the public service, and of course, to a large extent, of course, we'll see whether we can also attack, of course, defined benefit plan. I think, sisters and brothers, no matter how much of it they can go through, all the attack that we've suffered from this government, the time has come for all of us, of course, to fight back against the forces that want to weaken us and in some cases even destroy us. And we need every union as a critical part of this fight back ahead to ensure activists understand that we need to be engaged, and more importantly, we need to do everything we can to get ourselves ready for the upcoming federal election in 2015. We need everyone in this room to engage the members and the retirees and their families, because if we lose this fight, our very existence may be threatened permanently in this country. This is not a government that we've seen in the past who come and have some issues with the labor movement. They are quite determined, and everything what we have to do is to ensure that these guys do not get another mandate, because this country as we know it will not be the same place that we have fought and won consistently to, of course, advance the interests of working people. I want to remind you an old reference and an old labor slogan that today is so relevant as ever. An injury to one is an injury to all. The current attack on public sector workers send a signal to all governments and to employers, including the government of Yukon, that sees itself that baby brothers, the Harper Conservative, that is open season and unions and workers across this country. The Harper's government has gone out of its way to attack its own federal public sector worker and the bottom public sector. This strong corporations and agencies such as Canada Post, to list a few. It has laid off, and I think when the final numbers are tallied, it's been reported some 25,000 federal public sector workers would have lost their jobs under the so-called guise of austerity. Ordered worker back to work 5 times in collective bargaining at the federal level. At a time when many of those workplaces, workers have given up concessions after concessions to make their employer successful and keep the business open, when they finally got a chance to bargain, of course, this government intervened, of course, on the side of employers to attack those workers' rights. I've now recently, of course, went to attack the sick leave provision of federal public sector workers. And this, of course, they're preparing, of course, to come forward and trying to go after a defined benefit pension plan. We introduced a policy paper during the summer, which the labor movement had to respond to, and we're waiting to see what their position is going to be. They provide a signal and inspiration to what we saw from Mr. Hudak in Ontario during the Ontario election. For Mr. Hudak to campaign to say he was going to eliminate 100,000 public sector workers, 1 in 5 frontline public sector workers, including teachers, nurses, healthcare professions, of course, among others. And they gave courage and a pathway, I think, to a large extent, to every other right-wing anti-union politician and employer to get tough with their employees and attack their contractual rights across this country. There's never been a moment that I can remember, even though we've had recessions many times in the history of our country, that the 2008 financial crisis and recession where government using austerity measures to still go after workers and some of the most profitable corporations and, of course, in government continue to blame us like somehow we had something to do with the problem. The people who created the mess of 2008 have yet to be held responsible. As a matter of fact, not one single one of these bastards have ever gone to jail for the mess they created in the world economy. They continue to blame us like we're responsible, but we had something to do with the crisis. And some of our sacrifices, we're told we have to agree to austerity measures. Would I like the same people who are preaching this day in and out to, of course, to come to the table and agree to the same austerity measures for their pocket? You know, sisters and brothers, thanks to the good work of the Ontario Labour Movement, who got an ass kicked and kicked really hard. I can't tell how this party lost votes and seats, but thanks to the well-organized and well-researched campaign by the Labour Movement in Ontario, many governments and employers across this country are left scratching their head, wondering how they snatched the freeze from the jaws of victory. It wasn't hard to figure out. Mr. Hudak was met by a determined, organized resistance from the Labour Movement. Mr. Hudak is not coming to, Mr. Harper is not coming to the realization that he too might have gone too far in this country. But his mandate is not yet done. And sisters and brothers, I can tell you without any hesitations, That the CLC Convention delegates understood fundamentally, of course, what has to be done for the 2015 election next year. We respond to the right to conserve attack on workers and on unions to pass the funding required to launch the largest members engagement program the Labour Movement has ever undertaken with our Fairness Campaign initiative. The initiative saw some 53 unions, both inside the Congress and outside of the Labour Movement, it's not part of the Congress, pool their money to run a series of ads that raise the profile and connect with the public and our members of the good things unions have done on behalf of Canadians. I may ask the technicians if you can run the 2 ads so you can at least get a chance to see what some of your dues are paying for from your national organization. These are the last two you'll see of these ads.
Yesterday my life was big rain, sunny. You smiled at me and relieved the pain. Now the darkness and the brightness are here. My sunny one shines so sincere, sunny one so true. I love you.
The last one that's right on the spring of this year.
Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be there. I'll let you carry on, oh, it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
The ad last fall and the ads in the spring of this year have been extremely popular with our membership. They have helped instill pride in our unions and among our activists across this country. It's what's called a halo effect. Our members watch these ads, and of course they feel proud that they're part of the Labour movement and they're remembered. But it's not about the Together Fairness ad, they're seen as the popsicle ads. These proud members are our best messengers. They are encouraged to talk about what it means to be a union member. The popsicle ads, of course, reflect on the core Canadian values of fairness, like paid paternity leave, equity, weekends off, and vacations, and more. The Sunny ads last fall, of course, reached over 10 million Canadians across the country. 1 million union members that saw the ad to work and talk to their co-workers about what is the importance of being a union member. The research told us that we hit the mark with our targeted audience in our second series of ads. Again, millions that saw the ads, here are some of the highlights. 52% remember seeing the ads because they ran so many times on so many sites across the television. 53% said the ads were right on, an additional 29% said sort of right on, the combined total of 82% who said it was effective. 78% of the target audience agreed very much and somewhat with the ad's overall message. They also said the ad was effective in convincing respondents. In the research, the unions are one of the few groups that work to provide fairness across this country on behalf of Canadians. We didn't guess at our message, we truly researched it and tested it. Our second set of fairness ads featuring Lean On Me talked about pensions, gender equality, community service, good local jobs, and support for diversity, some of the core values of our movement. And we found that about 30% of Canadians clearly on our side, 20% are mostly anti-union, but 50%, the remaining 50%, do not fall into either camp. Of course, if we use good arguments, we can win them over about the values of fairness, and we are winning them over based on the research that we're doing. That's why our Together Fairness initiative has an external-internal approach so that we can help build affinity and engagement among our members and remind them of the good things our unions have done. The CLC has had fairness works training sessions for some 2,500 local union leadership across the country. They've already trained 1.2 million members, and the numbers are growing every single day. We're giving them the tools to talk to their co-workers about our shared values. The ground campaign is encouraging local unions to set up a communications network to engage union members and to reintroduce ourselves to some of our members. But it doesn't stop there. We have to reach out to the greater share of the public who are ambivalent about unions. And that's why I give kudos to your leadership in YEU at the beginning of my remarks. In some ways, I think you're ahead where we want to take the labor movement in relationship to the general public with our Together Fairness Works campaign. I understand that your union is engaged in targeted local community outreach, which help build affinity every day with Yukoners. You're engaged, of course, you organize Human Rights Speaker Series. Can't tell you the importance of that. The Family Fund, Skates, and Challenge the YEU locals. And if your members have raised money and donations for the local food bank. On these two issues, sisters and brothers, I don't need to tell you about the importance of it. See, if you're truly going to have respect for our values, our shared values, for equality for all, we've got to take the lead. And I know for sometimes that means challenging yourself and challenging your members about the importance of human rights and the importance to respect each other, whether you like each other or not. See, you didn't get to pick me. As a union member, and as a matter of fact, your union didn't get to pick you as a union member. Because actually, if our unions actually had a criteria for any of us to belong as a union member, many of us would have made it. Because our values would not align with the union movement. You see, unfortunately, the employer, I would say the boss, take this as union members. I went to work because I made an application, I got the job, and there was a union there, and I had to pay union dues. See, most organizations that have a membership, they get to select their membership. And it's a criteria. You know, what are you thinking about this and about that? And I was like, well, we come to the Chamber of Commerce. If you're a socialist, you don't make it in a membership. But the reality is we've got work to do, and our human rights work is critical to the kind of union, of course, and the expectation of our unions in terms of how we behave. The work you're doing to help raise, food for the food bank. You know, for many of us that are here, I would assume, we take it for granted. We're always going to have food in our cupboards. You know, we're not likely to worry about where our meals have come from because we have a good job and getting a good union salary. But the work that you're doing to help revitalize the food bank and show support, I think give recognition to the broadness of your union, about the social union you're trying to build and to practice here up in the Yukon. And it's critical, I think, in the broader work that you're doing, you get out there and you tell your story. Because this is what the YEU is all about. The public need to know what you do day in and day out to help your members, but more importantly, what you contribute to this great community to make it a better place for working people. And I want to commend your leadership for that work that you're taking on. This is getting attention in the community and will continue, of course, to help build support for the YEU and the greater union in the community. We also have to continue to explain what unions have done for workers across Canada and how we work to bargain good collective agreements to achieve laws to protect workers, such as health and safety, WCB laws, employment standard, human rights laws, and healthcare benefits that most Canadians take for granted. We have to explain the union advantage. The workers earn on average a little bit over $5.17 more for belonging to a union. But you have to belong to a union to make union wages. And union advantage for women is $6.89 higher if you're in a union because you're a woman. Or if your youth is over $3.75. And every single day across this country, we put $825 million more in the economy because of the union wage across Canada. Close to $1 billion goes into this economy because of what we do in the collective bargaining work we do to represent our members across this country. You've got to tell that story, because that's who we are. We're not simply greedy trade unionists trying to figure out how we can fill our pockets, because the money we spend keep communities vital and be revitalized across this country. We also have to take the opportunity to explain impact on unions and our movement, but at the same time, we have to build empathy and affinity with our members and the public to a large extent. Because we want to ensure when governments and employers come after us, our members are going to be there to fight and, of course, to stick with their unions at the end of the day. So, sisters and brothers, we also have to tie unions to the value of fairness. Let me give you some example. We have to switch the public perceptions about unions. There's three things that's synonymous that the public care about. That's why we're doing this ad in terms of the research that we have learned. Too often we're on strike. We're selfish and we're greedy. Nothing can be further from the truth, but that's generally what the public thinks of us. Let me give you an example and some statistics that most often people don't know about. 99% of collective agreement in this country is settled without a strike. Yet you will never see that on the front page of a newspaper or covered on national television. Think about it for a minute. The thousands and thousands of collective agreements we have across this country, 99% of them are settled without a dispute. Because we go to the bargaining table and spend the time and energy that's necessary to ensure we can work towards a collective agreement. Not to figure out how we can get on the street and go and strike, because we want to achieve that. We yet the public know nothing of that statistics. We've got to take the time to tell that story. Strike is a rare thing in our movement, and we do everything to try and avoid it, not to encourage it to a large extent. So it's critical, I think, in the work that we're doing, we need to tell a better story about our movement, because if we're not telling a story, the public does not know anything. If you think there's some invisible group of people out there talking the good talk about unions, stop for a minute. That invisible group of people are you in this room. And each one of us have to take on that responsibility with some enthusiasm. These ads will help tremendously that we're running, because they raise the profile of our movement. But the ad itself does not do the good work that was required across this country. We've got to take that on to a large extent individually. Our Together Fairness Initiative speaks to Canadians of the importance of unions and the value of fairness. We want Canadians to join us in having better wages and working conditions, to have better health and safety laws and protections across this country in employment standard relationship. Not to resent us as union members across this country, what we do on behalf of members. We want Canadians to know when we fight for retirement security, because we simply believe if you spend a lifetime in this country working, you should not have to live in poverty, regardless of where you're union member. We want Canadians to know that our national health care is a cherished right, and we will fight to defend it and expand it across this country, because every working people need to know when you get sick in this country, getting health care should not determine whether you have a credit card in your pocket or whether you have lots of money in the bank. We fight for equity and diversity because we truly believe a country that is equal and treats every single citizen the same is a country that is strong and united and fair. And that's the way is our values across this country. And when we fight for good jobs, because we fundamentally believe that no one should work day in and day out across this country and still live in poverty, and paying a decent wage should be a right, not a privilege in this country, regardless of what you do. So we fight on behalf of Canadians, and Canadians will respond. Yukoners will respond when we tell the story about the good work that we do, because we simply recognize we're not simply fighting for our members, we're fighting for the greater good of all Canadians right across this country. They will support the union. Some will even join it. Their union is growing to organizing in part because of the public acceptance and affinity. If people don't have a positive thing to say about their union, they won't join us. Your recent dispute with your North, the care you took about how you conducted your negotiations, because you easily went on strike, but you recognize fundamentally how much that will impact on your community. People who have to leave this territory to go get care other places. People who have to travel because they have family needs. Because of the care you took, the committee understood. You've got to take responsibility to tell that story, because you could easily have gone on strike. It's a success of the smart work that your union is doing. And by God, this committee needs to know more about that, because that shows your commitment and your determination to say, we are going to ensure while we're fighting for our members, but also looking out for the public at large in the Yukon. Thank you so much for the voice. In those days of reorganization where members have to hit the brakes and take on a strike, the union can rely on the community support and goodwill, such as the 2012 strike we had at Mini Rivers Counseling Services, because the community clearly understood what you were fighting for in that community. The other important ingredients in addition to public affinity is inoculate unions from the right-wing attacks, is the work of our stewards in connecting and having discussion with 50% of our members who don't think of the union when they put their pants on or their dress on in the morning. And that's many of us. These are the members who see the union as just there. And ambivalence drives their outlook towards the union. They see the union as not as their union and not as my union. So it's critical, I think, in that area. Let me tell you a story in my own way that to reinforce with you as leadership about the importance of this work. When I was a young man, when I first joined the union, I became a union member mostly by accident. I was looking for a better job, and ultimately I saw that in the paper and put an application in, and essentially I doubled my pay. Of course, I knew nothing about union. I didn't come from a family of union individuals. My father was very politically active, but he was not a trade unionist. So one day, a good friend of mine, who today remains a very dear friend of mine, a guy named Bill Merlin at the time, very young, came to me and asked me to go to a union meeting after I finished my probation. Of course, when you're young, about 18 and a half, union meetings are not the first thing on my mind. Of course, I didn't respond. I just said, thank you very much, and I did not go to the union meeting. But Bill was a very interesting individual. As I reflect on his way of engaging me, I truly learned something from him. He came again a month later and asked me to go to a union meeting, and of course, I kind of looked at him in a strange way, and I said to Bill, did you not just have one of those? He said, yeah, union meeting. Yes, we just had one of those last month. So I thought so. He said, it's on Sunday at 1 o'clock, same place, run me in Sinclair. And I said, thanks, Bill, but my habits haven't changed one bit. Well, I want to be honest with you, that what you see today is not the person that I was at 18 and a half. I love to get paid on payday, of course, because I had lots of money in my pocket. And more importantly, when you're 18 and a half, the wonderful thing about the weekend is that, man, I knew how to drink. I love getting drunk on the weekend. Friday night, Saturday night, recover on Sunday, come back to work on Monday. Start a routine all over again. Third time, Bill did come to me again one more time and said, Sam, we are having a meeting. And he said, Sunday, 1 o'clock, run me in Sinclair. I said, hey, you remember? I said, no, I didn't forget. My problem is I haven't changed my habit one bit. For some strange reason, I didn't go to that meeting. I sat in the last row and listened to the conversations of mostly men who were talking about issues of work, health and safety, and issues with the supervisor, and all the other challenges we face with. But the most important thing is I was struck by the conversation. And now, that's some 30-something years ago, that particular experience changed my life. There's two reasons for telling you this story. Bill never judged me. He could have, but he didn't. He just continued to be persistent, wanting me to go to the meeting. And his persistence got me to the meeting. See, there's a lot of members like me in the workplace. You know who they are, right? You go to them day in and day out, and they don't go to the meetings, or they don't come to the meetings, and they don't participate. I think we have to try harder. We must try harder. Because eventually you'll have a conversation will convince the sister or brother of the need to participate, to get involved. Because without them, we can't build a strong union. And we need those members to become involved. We need them to take responsibility and ownership. There are all kinds of reasons. Mine at the time was not a good one. I was too busy getting drugged. There are others who've got family responsibility. But the reality is that we don't have a choice. We have to continue to do what is necessary to, of course, to bring members along. And your work in that regard, you know, what's interesting about Bill and I saw Bill 15 years later, and after I first got involved in the union, I was then an executive vice president of Congress, and him and I had lost touch because he left the workplace shortly after I got involved, and actually asked me to run for his position to become the chairperson of the plant. I thought, for an 18-and-a-half-year-old, who in their right mind would vote for me? So I Bill says to me, you should run for my job. I said, you should run for my job. So I said, okay. Can you give me a reason as to why I should run for your job? Why would anybody even vote for me? He says, well, you know, guys you spend time with at lunchtime eating your lunch with, they kind of like you. I said, yeah, but I don't know why. Well, he said, this may be a compliment, but you may take it the wrong way. He said, you know, when the supervisors talk to you, he don't seem to think very much about what he has to say. He just simply responds to the first four-letter words that come into your mind. And it was true. When you're young, you can have a way of responding to supervisors, especially if you don't like them. So I swore at my supervisor quite a bit. My members of the workplace actually thought this was a really badge of honor. And he said, well, they will vote for you for simple one reason. Take it however you want. They prefer you to get fired than not. I didn't get elected. But I have to say this, that I realized right then and there that I had the responsibility of all these older men, older than my father, that I was responsible for, and I had to take some care of. And more importantly, I had to grow up. I just had to grow the hell up and start behaving appropriately. Because if you're responsible for the lives of fellow workers, it is serious business. And that means you've got to take responsibility. I learned lots in the many years that I've had. So of course, I got very immersed in the union work, and of course, the reality is, you know, many things happen along the way, and I've been fortunate. So I'm here. So I've come to the conclusion over the course of my experience in travels that it's people like yourself in this room who never give up to finding that young person or that member who's ambivalent about the union, and of course reaching out to engage them to make them active. And never stop about the work that you're doing to educate members about the strength and the work of this union, because all the challenges that you face, the work that continue to happen year after year, and building the collective agreement and advancing the rights of members is because of the good work that you're doing. And of course, it's never to become discouraged, because if you get discouraged, the employer wins. It's as simple as that. The minute you give up, the employer wins. We can't afford for that to happen. Now, of course, I want you to recognize that without the membership, which is the backbone of our movement, we're not going to have much of a movement. We're not a movement as individuals. We're a movement as collectives, where we all stand together and stand